Thank you again, everybody, for coming out this evening. Really means a lot that you would take this time to be engaged and informed in the community. Just a reminder that this evening's event is hosted by Dare to Dream. They're a nonprofit organization that in the city has organized this roundtable. They were created to enhance the lives of entrepreneurs and those whom they serve. It's a nonprofit designed to help aspiring entrepreneurs, regardless of background, who dare to dream, gain affordable access to legal, consultants, accountant resources, technical know-how, funding, scholarships, and other business creation resources. They're a non-political organization and nonpartisan. My name's Jake Oakes. I'm going to be moderating this section with our mayoral candidates. I'm with the Liberty United organization. I want to welcome Mike Mendenhall and Derek Gellison, and we look forward to hearing from them this evening. Many of these questions will be some repeat, but they are some important concerns or questions that came from the constituents. And so we'll start by a 90-second intro. Tell us where you live, a little bit about yourself.
I'm first?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks, Jake. Thanks for everybody for hanging in here. The sun's gone down, so we're here in the park, and it's a great place to hang out in City Park in Spanish Fork, Utah. I'm Mike Mendenhall, running for mayor this year in Spanish Fork. I've served the last 8 years on city council here in Spanish Fork. A little bit about me. I broke my arm on a red slide right over there at the age of 4. That's where it all started in Spanish Fork. After that, I grew up in Palmyra and on the other side of town at the mouth of the canyon. And so actually, not until I was 23 years old was I actually living inside Spanish Fork city limits. And that didn't stop me from being in Spanish Fork. I rode my bike from Palmyra and from the mouth of the canyon and hung out all day, every day at my friends' houses in Spanish Fork, at the gas station and everything else. And sometimes wouldn't come back until mom called somebody and said, "Where's Mike?" So I love this city. I've loved being a part of it. After graduating from high school here in 1998, I went away for a couple of years and served my church, came back and tried to find the prettiest girl in Spanish Fork. I did that. Amber Gesslison agreed to be married to me 18 years ago. And we've had a great time living in Spanish Fork ever since. We started our life in Ethelene Brunson's basement on Center Street there. Am I out of time? That's just the barely beginning of me. I'll get more of my Spanish Fork history in just a minute.
Okay.
Derek?
I'm Derek Gesselson. You heard him say Amber Gesselson. I didn't know we were related until I heard her last name. I think we're second or third cousins. But I've been in Spanish Fork my whole life. I've really only lived outside of Spanish Fork when I served a mission and when I did summer sales, and then I had a house in Orem for about a year. But other than that, I've been in Spanish Fork my whole life. I don't have cool breaking my arm stories. I've broken my arm. I was playing basketball. I feel like that's kind of how most people break their arms these days. But the main thing you guys need to know about me is I am a conservative constitutionalist. I am a registered Republican, but I identify more as a constitutionalist because I hold that document very sacred, and that's one thing I definitely want to kind of make my calling card if I were to become mayor.
Let me start with this question. What is your vision of Spanish Fork? What does it look like for 5 to 10 years from now? We'll start with Derek.
So I think my vision of Spanish Fork is more of what the citizens want the vision to Spanish Fork to be. I think a lot of people think too big when they start thinking of vision. They think, how much can I do in that amount of time? For me, I think, how much can I keep things relatively the same? Obviously, we need to grow as a community. We need to advance with technology. But one thing that people love about Spanish Fork is the small town feel. And with it growing at such a rate, we're kind of losing that. So in 5 to 10 years, I would hope to say that I was able to maintain that small town feel in Spanish Fork. You heard everyone talk about things like a rec center and things like that. Those are good ideas, but you start bringing in just so many more people, even from out of city, just to come to your rec center and things like that. I'm not opposed to that. We can get into that if that question's asked, but I think that would be my goal in the next 5 to 10 years, is for Spanish Fork to maintain that small town feel. And I mean, if anyone knows the name Gesselson, they know that that's very synonymous with Spanish Fork because of our Icelandic roots. And that's another thing I would want to bring back into the community, is some of those Icelandic traditions that people who have been here for the last 20 or 30 years kind of have seen with, the Iceland Days. It's often here in this exact park or down in Canyon Park. So that's kind of my goal for the next 5 to 10 years, is just that unique heritage with Spanish Fork, but also keeping the small town feel.
You can tell by Derek's last name and my wife's last name, 2 times that you need to do your genealogy in Spanish Fork is when you're about to take somebody on a date or run for political office. And you learn more about people in Spanish Fork, which is awesome. It's just awesome. The Gesselson name is something that I really love too. And I think it's very cool, the history of the Icelandic people that came here, that settled here, that were tough people, and just the more you learn about their history, and the Gesselson name is really cool and an important part of Spanish Fork. 5 to 10 years down the road, I can't say it better than Mayor Leifson has before. Brought back our motto for Spanish Fork while I've been in office, and it was the home of pride and progress. There's been talking about messaging here today on the stage from the council candidates who did a fantastic job. But part of that is, before it was pride and progress, it was surround yourself. And it had Spanish Fork in the middle, and then surround yourself. And depending on the way you looked at the logo, you would read it and you'd say, Spanish Fork yourself. And so it was sometimes hard for people to hear, what is the messaging? What's the messaging of this city? Well, it is pride and progress. It's about the heritage that we enjoy and keeping that small town feel, that quality of life, while we lean into progress. There is no way that 12 years ago you would have thought Spanish Fork is doubling to 44,000 people from 20,000, but it is. It'll continue to grow, and as long as we hold true to our roots, you'll still enjoy the quality of life no matter how many people live in Spanish Fork.
Thank you. Next question is going to be dealing with the downtown. Do you think our Main Street and downtown area is healthy and successful? If not, what would you do to change that? Let's start with Mike this time.
In 2011, I was the president of the Chamber of Commerce here in Spanish Fork. We worked hard with Main Street businesses. I have worked for 16 years on Main Street. I worked at Central Bank, Rock Canyon Bank, and now I'm a financial advisor with Edward Jones on 4th North and Main Street. So Main Street and its vibrant economic success is very important to me. People say it's busier. It is busier. It's busy because we have more people living in Spanish Fork, but it's also busy because we have people passing through Spanish Fork. We've worked hard, and it's another credit to the current administration, both the city staff and Mayor Leifson being intimately involved in the funding projects that'll get you more on and off ramps in Spanish Fork. So part of the traffic problem that people talk about in Spanish Fork is about to be solved in the next 5 to 10 years. That's another vision point that you'll see. You will see additional exits that'll help relieve some of the worst traffic times of Main Street, so it's simply more walkable. So we can be downtown, we can go to Stone Drug together, you can walk it, you can say hi to your friends again, and not worry about so many cars being on it. However, if you're a Main Street business, you do want some, you want some visibility of as many people as well. So Main Street is alive and well, and if I'm elected mayor, we will keep it alive and well.
Okay. So I think I come at it from a little bit of a different angle. So one issue I think everyone can recognize with Main Street, and this is really any city, old city in Spanish Fork, you're going to see this in Provo, even down to Nephi, things like that, they don't have a lot of parking. It's a historical section of the city, right? No one wants to disrupt it, but there's not a lot of parking. So you have places like Stone Drug where you typically are going to get your your pharmaceutical needs, but you're like, well, Walmart has better parking. So then you end up taking your business to Walmart. It is a very difficult problem to solve just like that, right? Because parking, it takes a lot of acreage, right? No one wants to sacrifice their homes or their businesses for parking. But I think that's actually part of the reason why it's hard to keep people on Main Street, as well as to entice people to come to businesses on Main Street. They don't know where to park. No one likes city parking. No one likes parallel parking on Main Street. So I think that's kind of the approach I would think is we need to make it more accessible to people so that they feel more comfortable coming to the various stores on Main Street.
Going to ask a follow-up question and offer 30 seconds to respond to that. Just recently after the Provo Freedom Festival, America's Freedom Festival, I saw a lot of people commenting on social media that they found it interesting paid parking structures were more full than the free ones that the city had invested lots of money into, because it was advertised on there that if you were not a customer of Wells Fargo or Zions Bank, you would be towed, even though that is free parking to the city. How would you implement a way to provide more parking downtown and make sure people visiting will know where to park? Let's start with Mike, 30 seconds.
Test. So I worked on that. You do see public parking signs on Main Street that were never there before. You can speak to the businesses on Main Street that talk directly to me and worked with the current city council and administration to get those public parking signs on Main Street so people could know that there's more places behind businesses to park. So we'd continue to expand that. I will tell you, government isn't the answer for everything. There are tough challenges that if you're looking for local government or any level of government to solve a problem for you, it'll cost you money. It'll cost you money to buy people's property and put parking in. So sometimes government's not always the solution either.
Thank you.
I would 100% agree with that. I think your private companies can always do things better and more efficiently than the government. With that said, I think a lot of the answer that we're looking for was within the question. I think we need to help people at least understand that there is accessible parking, because I'd be one of the people who would think the same thing. I don't know if I can actually park here. I don't want to get towed. I've been towed too many times in my life. So I think letting people be informed is already a solution that we can start implementing. That's not a hard solution, right? There's businesses that are there's parking behind the buildings. I think we just need to help people be informed about that.
Perfect. Our next question will tie this into traffic. There's lots of concern about traffic on the north end of town and trying to cross Highway 6. What can we do to address concerns with heavy traffic?
Great question.
Derek.
I think it's my turn. I think the traffic, well, part of it is, like you said, people passing through, but it's also due to our large expansion as a city. I think that kind of needs to be at a better pace at this point. Everyone understands that we're growing, but we're probably growing a little bit too fast. People want to come to Spanish Fork. That's a good thing. But people also want to feel like they're like the people of Spanish Fork did 20 years ago. And that's not exactly how it is when you're getting into a high-density neighborhood, right? So I think we need to kind of pace our growth a little bit better and make sure that we're pacing our infrastructure at the same rate. At this point, it seems to be, obviously, our growth is far surpassing our rate of expanding our current infrastructure, making sure that our roads are wide enough or that there's alternative routes for people to go as pass-through routes and things like that. So I think we really just need to pace our growth, and I think that will help alleviate a lot of the traffic that we're seeing, not just on Highway 6, but on Main Street and other places.
Highway 6 and I-15 is a major intersection in Utah and in the Intermountain West. You had a council member here that is running for election that served on UDOT for 25 years. We've worked closely with UDOT throughout many, many years to solve any problems that we can do at I-15 and Highway 6. Again, it's not Spanish Fork residents all the time driving I-15 and Highway 6. These are visitors. I get a message every time from the mayor of Moab driving through here that says, hey, I'm coming through Spanish Fork, I'm going to spend some money before I go back home to Moab. And so there's no easy fix to saying, hey, this road needs to be widened, this needs to happen. Again, the exit that's happening at 1700 North, the old Santana Raceway, if you've been here a long time, again, we've worked hard on that to get the funding from the state of Utah to get that taken care of, along with the hospital that has come into Spanish Fork to bless so many lives. It's not just Spanish Fork residents driving there, it's visitors. Now those visitors keep our economic base high and our residential taxes low. So you do have some trade-off between busy traffic in Spanish Fork versus driving to Orem for your needs and encountering busy traffic there. So again, if there's a 10,000 foot level, I will say, yeah, you get stuck into some traffic. I do too. I'm over there all the time. But you're 3 minutes away from your house in Spanish Fork versus being stuck in Orem trying to go to the Costco and then being 30 minutes from your house.
Thank you. The question about the pool had come up a couple times, even for mayor. And so we're going to ask that question again. With the pool closed, do you want to implement a rec center? If so, how would you pay for it?
So I've been to the pool one time this year. Amber's been more time than I can probably count. So when you see who's down there a lot, it is moms and families with their kids just enjoying each other's company and enjoying the pool. And so it's been said, hey, we wish we could keep it. There's nobody that wishes we could keep that pool more than the current Spanish Fork City Council and the mayor. That's an agreement with Nebo School District long ago that knew at some point they would expand that high school for their needs. So yeah, a pool is definitely something we're talking about right now, whether it's attached to a rec center or not. Again, what you're going to do is go to the citizens and say, here's the real numbers. Here's the transparency. Here's the cost. Is this something that's important to you? Yeah, it's a want. You don't need it necessarily, but is it something you want? Because 6 years ago, it was talked that, hey, we can go to Springville or we can go to Payson. Those places are pretty full too. Those communities grew as well. And so it's hard to get in some of those places. And so a community pool is something definitely we're asking citizens for their input right now. And of course, here's the shocker. It's going to cost money. Unless you have a rich uncle willing to part with $25 million, it is going to cost you and I some money if we want another pool. And so we need to be fiscally conservative about that approach and simply say, what do we want? What will facilitate those people that enjoy that so much? Not just my wife and my kids, but the senior citizens that go down there and get their recreation, okay, and stay healthy in Spanish Fork. Those are the ones that are contacting me the most right now. So yes, we've got to figure out a solution. The citizens need to come up with those good ideas and come to us, and we'll help facilitate that discussion.
So I think this is where you can see that I am actually a conservative constitutionalist, because if it's going to increase any taxes, I'm an absolute no to that. I'm going to continue with my point in that I think private companies can do it better than the government. I think what we would have to do is make it easier for entrance into something like that. Everyone has this idea that a rec center or a pool has to be funded by the city. I don't think it does. I think a private company could do it better. I think they could do it cheaper, not just for building, but also for people who would want to enter. So I think that's really the solution, is finding a way that we can allow someone else to hoof that bill. I think if you can't do something within your current tax budget, then you're doing it wrong. There should never be an expectation for tax increases. If you ever have to increase taxes, it should have an expiration date on it. So that's where I come into a much more conservative angle. I think we need to change our view on this. I think we need to start thinking other people are probably a better solution than the government on this.
What do you envision for economic diversity in Spanish Fork?
So by economic diversity, I think you're meaning what, like different types of businesses, I would assume, right? And we always have a joke in my family, all there is to do in Spanish Fork is eat, right? We used to have a nice bowling alley down on Main Street that we used to go to. That went out years ago. And so I'm very open to having more of these businesses come in. Another question that they presented to us is, where do you like to spend a lot of your time in Spanish Fork? I like to be at Coin Crazy. I think that's one of the best places. You've got a bowling alley, you've got a lot of games. So I'm very, very open to having economic diversity come in, so much as it doesn't bring in more dense crowds, right? I work in Pleasant Grove, and in that Lehigh area, there's a lot of tech businesses. Those are good businesses to have, but for a small community, you can see what it's done to places like Lehigh. It kind of ruins that small town feel. Lehigh used to be a super small town. So I absolutely love the idea of bringing in new types of businesses. I'm excited for the trampoline place we're getting at the Shopco whenever that comes in. As long as we're not bringing in the wrong types of businesses that don't, I mean, the businesses themselves should hold our values, but also the size of the company should be a scalable company that wouldn't make us feel like we're becoming the next Lehigh or the next Salt Lake or anything like that.
I'm a free market capitalist. I've been in business my whole life. I had 2 meetings last week with businesses that are interested to come to Spanish Fork, and I have one on Wednesday that is a business slated to come to Spanish Fork. These businesses like Spanish Fork, number one, because of the economic success that we're having already, but also the nexus of geographically where we are as well. We've become the hub of South Utah County, and so a lot of people are traveling from the north and from the south into Spanish Fork and spending their money. Again, the good thing for the taxpayer, for you and I, about that is that they pay, they eat, they go to Coin Crazy, they do whatever, and then they go home. And we typically don't have to serve them unless they get in an accident and our cops get called out or something. But they spend their money, which helps you and I and our tax rates. So the economic diversity is a platform of mine. When people say, do you have an agenda running for city council? Again, if you remember one thing about my agenda tonight is to continue the economic success of Spanish Fork, so our residential taxes can stay low. And that's the secret in municipal government for a lot of cities. So you're going to continue to see that championed.
How are you going to balance addressing the need for planning infrastructure for the growth in Spanish Fork and the concern over high-density housing? We'll start with Derek.
So a lot of people in the up here for city council kind of touched on what their thoughts were on high density. And what we've also been presented by people is that having these high density houses is helping people who are trying to enter the housing market. That's not true at all. Most people for their first time buying a house are going to be buying houses that are like these, some of the older homes. When we talk about the need for all the homes in the country, and especially in Utah, everyone thinks it's just any type of home. The reality is, the Wall Street Journal did a study on this, 3.8 million in the houses in demand in this country for single-family homes. And that's because people in these homes that have been there for 20 or 30 years, probably people who have paid off their mortgage, are looking to get into bigger homes, and then people can then enter the market by getting into these older homes. When we're building these high-density houses, people think, okay, they're just going to buy a townhouse. That's less expensive, right? Townhouses are going for the same price as most houses these days. I think the townhouses that are being built around Spanish Fork come in a lot higher than my house that I bought in March. So I think we need to focus more on single-family houses and not on the high-density houses, because that's actually what's going to solve the issues that people have right now.
When you talk about the effect on infrastructure, if high-density housing has an effect on infrastructure, we do a lot of traffic studies and different studies when we approve a subdivision. We're approving one next council meeting for 80 homes on the east side of town that are single-family lots, single-family homes, and everything else. But again, we're talking about that in a year of unprecedented drought where people are saying, geez, look at this yard, this thing that I got to keep up, right? And how do I do it? Well, some higher densities, not high density, but higher densities, meaning 8 units the acres, townhomes, things like that, do impact that area less. That piece of ground is impacted less than if it was single family homes on that piece of property. So a diversity of housing is important in Spanish Fork. There are some states right now that have outlawed single family residents. They say, hey, we are cities, excuse me, in other states, they're saying we're not going to take any more applications for single family homes. I don't think you'll ever see that in the state of Utah. You won't ever see that in the city of Spanish Fork. But what you will see is a diversity of options so we can make sure that our kids do get the chance to grow up and experience the same fun stuff that we do in Spanish Fork. As far as the effect specifically on water, when you look at a farm field and it's being watered with an acre-foot of water over that field, when you put houses on that, they're actually using net less water than that farm was. And so that's a question that always comes up. And that's not to say we're getting rid of agricultural in Spanish Fork either, but we are certainly going to listen to the property owner that might want to sell his property as well.
If the governor comes down with a mandate that is unconstitutional, what would you do to ensure that the Constitution is upheld? Start with Mike.
This obviously getting into the COVID discussion here. I am so proud of Spanish Fork and the way that we handled something that we never thought we'd see in our lifetime. What we did was try to be smart and effective in protecting our citizens and say, hey, if you're coming into City Hall, wear a mask, because that's what the epidemiologists are saying will help out. Anything else, I don't think, I mean, again, you can look last year at this time, we held a rodeo in Spanish Fork. There was not an event held like that in the state of Utah. And we stepped out there and said, no, we can do it effective. We can keep people safe. There's 3 co-equal branches of government as well. So if something's unconstitutional, definitely, I've argued in front of the state legislature multiple times over the last 8 years about the Constitution and about the right of property owners in their city and your rights as local citizens to do what you want to do, to stay free, which is one of the principal tenets of government, and especially municipal government. So I'll continue to do that regardless of what state mandates come down. You can bet I'll be up at Capitol Hill every single year talking about local authority and how the government closest to the people governs best.
I think I'm going to reflect what Bill said, in that we should have had people speak up in this town when it came to these things that were unconstitutional. Like I said, I'm a constitutionalist. I'm not going to shy away from that point in any way. I think when it comes to things like mask mandates and things like that, people thought, okay, it's for the greater good. That's up to you. We have the freedom to make that choice. And sometimes people think the best thing to do is to just not say anything because that could be an unpopular opinion. Part of being a constitutionalist, in my opinion, is speaking out. That's why I'm running for mayor, is because I wanted to actually speak out about the issues that people just wanted to keep the status quo. I'm against the status quo, and status quo is wrong. So I would do everything I could in order to make sure that your constitutional rights are upheld. And if that means taking what many might see as an unpopular opinion, I'm going to do that.
I'm going to combine kind of 2 questions here. And that is, how do you plan on giving more opportunity for your what accountability will there be?
What was the second part of the question?
Accountability. How do you ensure accountability?
So we heard a lot of the opinions on this early on. With it being 2021, obviously we can implement a lot of technology. I'm the youngest person that's running for any public office at this point. It's been my whole life, right? I think it does take a millennial to kind of figure out the best way to implement technology into how we run our cities. I definitely think it is good to get people more involved. I recently attended a city council meeting, and it didn't feel like the people had enough time to speak their opinions. It felt like most of the time was devoted to letting special interests and the council and mayor kind of voice their opinions. And their opinions are valid, but as everyone said, we are representing the citizens. And I would love to have a new format for things like city council that would allow for more voices to be heard. I'd want to find ways to implement technology to funnel in everyone's opinions on various issues within Spanish Fork. I think there's a lot of ways we can implement it. I don't have all the solutions, and that's part of my platform, is making sure that I'm accessible for everyone, and that I don't act like I know everything. I know people know more than I do in a lot of regards, so I want to hear everyone's opinions on that. And so I'm not ever going to pretend like I have the answer to everything. But I think that's kind of the start to my approach.
What a welcome phrase of somebody running for political office. I don't have all the answers. Come to me and talk to me, and let's see where we can figure them out together. I've been that way in 8 years of public service, and it doesn't matter. You can come talk to me at City Council if you'd like to talk on camera and be on the record and talk that way. That intimidates a lot of people sometimes. So please feel free. I'll be here the next week in the park with my family. We usually set up right over there, but I'm always around here with my kids. You'll see me at nearly every event as well. Feel free to come up to me anytime. If you don't want to text me, call me, email me, whatever you want to do, but come up and tell me your ideas as well. I'm completely accessible to the public. I think if you simply ask the voters that have voted me in twice now, if I respond to their emails, if I reply to their questions, their texts, their voicemails, you'll see that I do that quite a bit. You can ask Amber that it's some nights until 1:30 doing that, and that's after I get home from my day job. So everybody knows that coming into this. This is a lay position, so this isn't a full-time mayor or full-time council whatsoever. But everybody knows going into it that you are going to be bombarded with questions and discussions, and I'm open to doing that for the next 4 years for sure.
If you received a $1 million grant for use in the city in any way you wanted, how would you use it, and how would you ensure that there's no strings attached?
Another $1 million grant in the city? We've got a $1 million grant in the city, and what we did was put it into the citizens' hands to spend on local businesses here in Spanish Fork. That's another fantastic, if there's fantastic COVID stories, that came out of Spanish Fork's experience. When we received that money based on our population, and the mayor spearheaded this with the council and with staff to say, how can we get this money out to the residents and into local businesses' hands? And we went to the big boys. We went to the big businesses and said, you won't participate, right? Now talk about the buy-in of those businesses too. You couldn't spend that money at Costco and some other places, but you could on Main Street. And when you go into somebody's business on Main Street and you say, here's $75, I got $60 worth of stuff, just take it. They say, keep the other 25 and go spend it somewhere else in Spanish Fork. Now that's living in a community. That's living in a community where people know that the best form of government is the people's government, is your government, when you come up with ideas and implement those ideas. So we have received a $1 million grant. If there's no stipulations, I'd probably do that again. Other $225,000 grant we put into Fit City Initiative. It's been mentioned here tonight. The Active and Healthy Fair has got more mental health and physical health resources out of the 45,000 people in Spanish Fork than any other city in the state. And now the state is taking aim at that and trying to copy that in Spanish Fork. You're going to see city by city talk about things that they didn't talk about before, the physical and mental health of their citizens.
Test. Okay. I would hold on to it for a rainy day. I think so many people think if you get money, the first thing you have to do is spend it. I think that's a big issue, not just with individuals, but with government. So I'd hold on to it for a rainy day. We have discussed plenty of things where we're like, we would need more public funding for X, Y, and Z, right? So things are going to come up. I would hold on to it. I think that's the most fiscally conservative thing you can do with the money.
So the oath that you take as mayor requires that you take an oath to the Constitution. Our state constitution requires that you subscribe that oath. What does that mean to you?
I'll go first.
Derek.
I think I'm kind of sounding like a broken record at this point. Some additional part of the question that was sent to us is if the government or if the state of Utah asked you to do something unconstitutional, what would you do, right? I'm always going to go back to the Constitution. I have it in my pocket right here. I would have this on my desk. I would have it everywhere as I would be mayor because it's meant to protect people. And people often forget what the point of government is. I think we need to get back to the roots of the Constitution, which is to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that is what I would do no matter what. So to me, what that means is, as I've stated before, being outspoken about it, not just being back in the shadows saying, I agree with this or I don't agree with that, depending on how it makes me look publicly. I think upholding the Constitution is meaning that you will fight life and limb to protect it, and doing so unafraid, publicly, in front of everyone's eyes.
Yeah, all 8 years that I've been involved in local city government has been with one of my council colleagues, Keir Scobes, who's a colonel in the National Guard, currently at the Army War College, to become a general in a year for the Army. And so when we talk about the Constitution and about defending it and fighting for it, I would always talk to Keir Scobes about that and the importance of it. And if you don't think for 1 minute that your current city council and your mayor are in meetings discussing that all the political powers are inherent in the people, which is the second article of the Utah Constitution. All political powers are inherent in the people. We simply know that, and that's how we operate. And so you're going to see that not just vocally defended by me, but also, again, my colleagues across the state, those that are active in military service. I constantly check with them, and they constantly simply say, yeah, that's what we're fighting for. That's what we defend you for. That's what we go to battle for when we need to, is to protect that freedom, protect that right of the people to be free, of the people to choose, which is the idea of municipal government. Keep them safe, keep the population safe. We're the safest city in the state of Utah, and keep them free. Let them make decisions.
The last line of the Fifth Amendment in the Constitution says, "Nor shall your private property be taken for public use without just compensation." How will you uphold property rights within Spanish Fork?
It's a great question, and this always comes up in municipal government. Again, I've been up to the state government many times talking about how important the rights of property owners are. Both you, if you own a home on a quarter-acre lot, and what you can do with your property that you've purchased, and if you own 50 acres on the east side of town, or if you own those four walls of your townhome, you'll see me and the future of this council, whoever sits on it, fighting ardently for those private property rights. Now, there are times where in cities, I think Brett brought it up in American Fork, that his family talked about eminent domain, and it was probably to expand a road. It was probably the discussions we're having here. Hey, we need bigger parking lots. Hey, we need bigger roads and things like that, right? Well, some of those discussions come up, and of course, that has to go through the legal process of it, and people have to be justifiably compensated. And if you talk to people in the council, you'll talk about me actually being the person that says, hey, you better be ready. The citizens better be ready to not just compensate fairly, but probably over fairly for displacing anybody that ever had property that was, in the way of progress eventually because you grew that much. But private property rights is always at the top of my mind in every single decision I make. I think it's a God-given right, and it is protected by the U.S. Constitution and by the state Constitution, and it is protected ardently here in Spanish Fork.
I think a lot of people can get a lot of heated debates when it gets into eminent domain. I definitely agree, the same thing, that we need to protect people's property rights. Another thing that people probably think this is more of a radical position, but I think property taxes are illegal. I don't see how that's legal, honestly. I think if you own a property, you should own a property. You shouldn't be having to pay the government to own the property. So I think that's actually part of it. Obviously, that's way out of our scope, but I think making sure that people feel comfortable where they live goes beyond just protecting the zoning or whatever in that area. But, that's a big part of it. We've just had a lot of discussions in city council of they're going to make a zone change right next to a community, and sometimes people feel like that's an infringement on their property rights. I don't know if it actually is, but I want to hear people's opinions on that because they came to those areas, they came to this town for a specific reason, and I think that does definitely play a part into making sure we're protecting people's property rights.
Thank you. We'll conclude with just 30 seconds of closing remarks, and Derek, we'll start with you.
Well, hopefully I've iterated to everyone that I am a constitutionalist, I am a conservative, I am definitely hardcore a conservative. I want to make sure that we can minimize taxes. I want to make sure that we can protect people's rights. I want to make sure we can uphold the Constitution. I want to get back to what we were 200 years ago. People think that's crazy, but I don't like the idea of the government being in our daily lives. People who are in public office, we're meeting once or twice a year, and we've made government such a daily part of our lives that we think they have to solve all of our problems. Government's usually the problem itself. So my biggest goal is to make sure that we can minimize the size of government.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting this. Thanks for the questions. Thanks, Derek, for running and some good ideas. I look forward to working with everyone in the future, including Derek, including the great council candidates. Look, I've done this for 8 years. I didn't think I'd do it this long, but I've really enjoyed it. And the thing I've enjoyed most is getting to know the residents of Spanish Fork, even more than I did when I was a kid. And I love them so much. I love them in the way that I want to make sure that they're protected, that they're safe, but they continue to enjoy the success that is Spanish Fork and the pride and progress that we all enjoy here. I'm Mike Mendenhall. I'm running for mayor, and I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Give a round of applause. And thank you for those who were also listening in from home. It is very important we're involved and aware in the community. We want to thank Dare to Dream for hosting this. Thank you.